All right, I'm going to go ahead and get us started now. Thank you for waiting. Today we're talking about Nebula. I don't know how the marketing advertised it, but this is sort of a best practices, tips and tricks, things that get overlooked, sort of amalgamation of topics that we'll cover today. They're going to be a little bit boring, and I do apologize for that, but I promise there is some good stuff in here. I have a tendency to talk quick, probably because I got started doing these long webinars where we had, 100 slides to go through in less than 60 minutes. So if I'm going too fast for you, if you have some questions, use chat, use the Q&A, send those questions in, or yell at me to slow down and repeat something. Um, and I will do my best to do so. So we're going to start by talking about orgs and sites. This is something that causes confusion for a lot of people who are new to using Nebula. So I sort of wanted to talk about it. Generally, an organization is your customers. The assumption here is if you're joining today's webinar, you are an MSP, you are a VAR, a system integrator, and you've got customers that you are managing their networks through Nebula. So generally, each of your customers is going to be put into their own organization, and then any locations they have under that would be sites. So if the customer just has one site under the org. The customer has lots of different sites under that organization. And I'll kind of explain why that is as we go through the webinar a little bit more. But that is a common mistake people make. They create the organization as their company, and then they start putting all of their customers as sites when it should be each of your customers is an org, and then they can have sites underneath that. So part of the reason for that has to do with how licensing is done. So if you have any customers that you want to upgrade from the free version of Nebula to Plus or Pro Pack, you do that on an organization basis. Plus and Pro refers to the level of features that are unlocked in Nebula, and you unlock that on an organization basis. So obviously, if you run into a situation where all of your customers are under different sites, you're going to have to upgrade all of your customers to ProPack if you want to upgrade just one customer to ProPack. If you don't, give them each their own organizations. So that's probably the number one reason um, why you want to split them up this way. You may also find yourself in a situation where you may want to have one customer with multiple orgs, and we'll explain that on the next slide. Something important to understand is when you're creating a new org, whoever creates that org is automatically the owner. Each organization can only have one owner, and there are some features that are only available to that owner. So that's something else to keep in mind. So um, generally, you don't want each of your admins or techs creating their own orgs. You want one dedicated account that owns all the orgs and you don't get locked out of. We recently ran into a situation with a customer where there was a falling out between partners. One of the partners left the company and they lost access to his email that he had all these orgs registered under. So there was nobody at that company anymore that had ownership access to their customers in Nebula. So generally, this would probably you'd want to create a dedicated sort of top level admin account that's there for creating orgs. You don't want to give everybody access to that account, just the head people there at your organization, however you've got things structured. And you can create orgs in advance. So one thing you can do is you can go into Nebula and you can create a half dozen or a dozen organizations with no name, just org one, org two, org three, and just leave them empty with no devices, nothing else assigned to them. And then when one of your techs needs to go out and create a new org for a new customer, they just grab one of those empty ones, rename it, and populate it at that point. So that's one thing that I would suggest that you do. There is no limitation to the number of sites that can be underneath an organization. So again, just to summarize, each of your customers should have their own org. Now, one of the things we have run into here is you need ProPack features for some feature that's on a switch, or you need features for ProPack for something that's on an admin, or maybe your customer just has one site that needs to have ProPack access. Maybe they've got multiple warehouses in one retail location. The retail location needs ProPack features, the warehouses do not. So in those types of situations, you can create multiple orgs for the same customer, and only those organizations that need Pro Pack or Plus Pack, you put those sites under there, and all the other sites stay under the free version. So just trying to highlight and explain how this is working for you to help visualize it. You've got an account owner. Again, each organization has one and only one account owner. And then you have sites underneath that organization. So as you add customers, you add organizations in Nebula and you add the sites underneath them. If you need to upgrade to Plus or Pro Pack, you do that on an organizational basis. So you select the org that is going to be upgraded, we'll just say to Pro, and you will need to buy Pro Pack licenses for every device in that org. You cannot convert an organization from free into Pro until every device has a Pro Pack license assigned to it. So when you're creating new organizations and customers, something that often gets overlooked is we do have a bulk site creation tool. We have the ability for you to create multiple sites all at once, rather than needing to manually go in one after another to help speed things up for you. So when you're using the multiple site configuration tool, you can choose whether to use the default Nebula configuration. If you've already created at least one site for the customer, you can clone the settings from that site as a starting point for your new sites. We also let you download a template, and you can upload a template and use a template for that initial bulk creation. So now let's talk about administrator accounts. So we've got a couple different levels of organization level access, and then we have site level access. And depending on how you've been doing things, you may never have seen the site level access settings in the Nebula interface. So we'll go through each of these four different types of organizational level, and then we'll talk about the different site level access that you can set. So again, basically you can have one owner, and that's going to be by default whoever created the organization in Nebula. Now, once an organization has been created, you can always transfer ownership to another account. So if one of your guys has created an org, it's not his forever. You can have him then transfer it over to the proper account that should be the owner for that org. But an organization can only have one owner account at a time. Um, and basically, as owner, you have access to everything. You have access to all sites, all customers, all settings, all features in Nebula. Next, underneath that, when you're creating a new admin account, you can choose to make them full. And I believe that's the default setting when you're creating a new admin in the Nebula interface. So they're going to have access, as the name implies, to pretty much everything. All of the organizations in there, all of the sites. And they have access to almost all of the features that are in Nebula. So you can delegate owner's authority to a full admin user. So if you create an admin, you make them full. There's also going to be a checkbox to delegate owner's authority, and that will give them some extra access to features, basically giving them everything that the owner has, except the ability to delete organizations, the ability to delegate ownership authority to other admins, and the ability to transfer ownership. So other than these three features, a full level org manager who has also been delegated owner's authority has access to every other feature inside Nebula. The next setting we have here is read only. So with read only, if you set your admin account to read only, as the name implies, they cannot change anything, but they can see everything. So they can see all orgs, they can see all sites under those orgs and control what they have access to. And then there is none. So if you set it to none when the user logs in, that org will show them nothing. And so when you select none, you will be forced then to go and choose site level. You will also be given the access to the site level settings if you had set an admin user to read only. So if they're set to read only or none, they will have then access to site level. If you select none, you must configure site level. And what site level does is it then gives you basically access to these different site level features for specific sites. So if you have somebody you want to grant them access to Warehouse 2 and only Warehouse 2, this is how you would do it. You would set them to none. And then you grant them the level of access you want for Warehouse 2, and that's going to be the only thing they can see in the Nebula interface. So there is full, which obviously gives you, whoops, which gives you access to all of the settings inside that specific site. Read only, like before, only allows them to see the settings. It doesn't allow them to configure anything. A monitor only. So it gives them read-only access, but only to the monitor tab in Nebula. So they can see the monitor stuff. They can't see any other configuration settings that are part of Nebula. Installer. So this is something that should be pretty popular for you to use. And this is basically gives them access to be able to add devices to that site. So they're able to scan the QR code on the Nebula compatible hardware and assign it to a specific site, um, as well as some other little minor settings associated with that. Basically anything on the device detail page. And you can set these up to automatically expire. Right. So if you're using a third-party installer on site, or you're getting help from somebody that works for the customer who you're installing this, helping you install stuff at their site, you can grant them installer access, and you can set it to automatically expire after, say, 2 weeks. So you don't need to remember to go in there and remove their access later. And then lastly, there is Guest Ambassador. So this is a feature that's part of if you're doing public hotspot management, and you're basically using vouchers, paid vouchers for access to that public hotspot, or you're just granting visitors their own unique username and password when they log in or to connect to the public hotspot with limited time availability. The guest ambassador has the ability to go into Nebula and create those accounts or create those vouchers for the public hotspot, and that's the only thing they have access to for that site. So setting up administrator access is pretty easy. When you go in to create a new administrator, you're going to fill in their name and email address. And then you've got a drop down here where you can choose what level of access they have. So if you select full, you will have the ability to delegate ownership authority. If you don't select full, you will not have access to that. And this is where you would select something like read-only, etc. Now, if you set them to none or read-only, it will then add an extra section in the interface for sites where you can add as many or as few of sites as you want, and you can mix and match the access. So you could perhaps give them access to full for the Warehouse 2 where they work, but only give them read-only access to some of the other sites that are there. Transferring ownership again is pretty easy. Um, excuse me. Um, so you simply go in here, click the add button, make sure you've set up a new admin account, so get that all up and running. So you're going to want to make sure they are set up with full access. Once that has been saved and added into the system, then you simply go in here and click the change owner button up at the top of the page there. It will prompt you then to select who the new owner is. It will ask you to confirm, are you sure you want to do this, because you will lose your ownership access, and you click yes. And that's all that needs to be done there to transfer ownership. And it's a similar process if you want to transfer devices or licenses from one site to another site, or from one org to another org. And same thing here, what you're going to do is you're going to go into organization-wide settings, go to your license and inventory page. And if we want to transfer device, we then choose the device tab. There's a checkboxes going down the list of devices, so you simply select the devices that you're going to want to transfer. Then you go to the action button, and you can choose to change the organization or change the site assignment for that device. And that's all there is really to it. You'll be prompted with this screen here. It's confirming that that is what you want to do. You select the new organization or site that you want to transfer it to, and then you click finish. And it's the same basic process for doing license transfers, only you're going to do that from the licenses tab. And again, to transfer licenses, you will need to be the owner or have ownership authority delegated to you. So again, same process. So activating Plus or Pro Pack, this is something where we run into issues with customers. They've bought the licenses, but it's still in the free version of Nebula. So why is that? And the answer to that is you do need to specifically tell Nebula after you've assigned the devices, licenses to all the devices, you do need to tell Nebula, okay, I'm ready, go ahead and convert from free to Pro Pack or Plus Pack or whatever it happens to be. So there's a really easy way to see if you are ready for that. Go to organization-wide settings, license and inventory, and on the default overview page, there will be a button here that says upgrade now if all of your devices have a valid Pro license assigned to them to upgrade it to Pro. If it says purchase license, that means that some device does not have a license assigned to it. So you either need to buy some more licenses or you have the licenses in your inventory, but you haven't yet assigned them to the device. So if it says upgrade now, you're good to go. If it doesn't say upgrade now, something's wrong and you need to either buy more licenses or assign the licenses to the right device. This will also confirm for you what level of service you're at. So it'll show you here base pack, which is the free version of Nebula. So if that upgrade now button is on there, you go ahead and click it, and it'll just give you a little confirmation, making sure you want to start it because there's no rolling it back once you've started the clock here. So yes, you do. We also have the ability to do trials in the Nebula interface. So almost all of the licenses that we sell that are optional, we give you a 30-day free trial inside the Nebula interface. And again, it's the same area, organization-wide licenses and inventory, and you get these demos for each org you set up. So these demos can be used for each of your customers as you create new orgs for each of them. It is not tied to your admin account or to your owner account. It is tied to the organization in the Nebula interface. So you can see they're all just listed there, and you click activate to be able to use them. Now, one area that causes some confusion is if you're using the Pro Pack trial. So either you've activated it this way, or when you were setting up the org, we prompt you, do you want to try out Pro? If you'd selected yes there, it enables the Nebula Pro Pack features, but you will continue to see this message at the top of every page. This is the message that's on the free version of Nebula, letting you know that you can unlock features with Nebula Plus or Pro. So normally, if you bought Pro Pack and upgrade your organization to Pro, this goes away. But if you're just doing the demo, it stays there. So if you want to check, to confirm that you are currently using the trial or when that trial expires, it's not going to show it on the overview page. The overview page will continue to show you're using the free version of Nebula. Instead, you want to jump over to the trial tab, and then you can check the Nebula Pro Pack trial. And if it's active, it will show in progress here, and it will show you the expiration date for that free trial. And if for some reason you want to end the trial early, you can do that by clicking deactivate. But you, again, only get one trial per organization. So if you deactivate it, you can't reactivate it later. So something else that causes a little confusion for people. So initially when we launched Nebula, we have this QR code. You scan the QR code, you assign the device to a customer on site, and then from that point on, you're good to go. Initially, we required you to manually transfer hardware from one site to another or one org to another. And a lot of our larger MSP customers complained about that. Saying, hey, if there's a problem with hardware on site, we send somebody out to the location. And the first step is we just do a hardware swap to a new piece of hardware. And then we take the other piece of hardware back. If the swap fixes the problem, we know there was a defect in the hardware or something like that. And we'll take that back to the lab and test it and see if we need to RMA it or if it can be reused for another customer. And because you're swapping in and out all this hardware, once you've got, hundreds or thousands of customers, it happens quite frequently. It's a real pain to have to go into Nebula each time we swap out hardware and manually remove the device from the site to be able to reuse it at another customer location. So we changed how Nebula works, and we've basically made the assumption that if you have access to that QR code, which again on most products is on the belly label of the product or on the box, and you scan that QR code, you have ownership of that device. It also helps in situations where when people have bought hardware, scanned it, not used it, returned it to distribution, and then distribution sends it out to another customer and they couldn't use it because it was still assigned to another customer, even if it had never been opened. Uh, this allows us to solve that as well. So anybody who has access to the hardware has the ability to assign that device to a organization and a site. The downside of that is you've installed a bunch of access points at your customer's location, and somebody at your customer's location goes, "Hey, what's this QR code? Let me scan this QR code." Um, we could then take over management of your device. So that is something that you can disable. Once you've deployed everything, you can simply go into the organization under organization-wide management settings, organization settings, you can disable that for the org. So once the device has been assigned to that organization, it cannot be reassigned to another organization just by scanning the QR code. So that's done on a per org basis. But that is something which we have had happen out in the field. Normally, it's somebody in management or IT at the customer who decides to scan the QR code and start playing around with things. So if you don't want the convenience of being able to easily move devices from site to site or org to org by scanning the QR code, you can turn that off here in the Nebula interface. So let's talk a little bit about alert aggregation. So for me, one of the annoying things with Nebula, or one of the good things with Nebula is that it can alert you when a device goes offline. The annoying thing is you get a single notification for every device that goes offline. Um, so if you have a customer and they have a power outage, their fiber gets cut, whatever it happens to be, and they've got, say, 80 devices at that site, you will get 80 notifications letting you know a device has gone offline and another 80 notifications when those devices go back online. So we do have the ability to aggregate those alerts. So instead of getting 80 pop-ups, you get just one pop-up saying, hey, 80 devices have gone offline at this customer's location. So this is something, though, you do need to turn on. So to do that, you do that on a site-by-site basis, not an org basis. So if your customer has 10 sites, you have to do this for all 10 sites, unfortunately. So you go to site-wide management, configuration, alert settings, and toggle on the aggregate alerts. We've got a slide here explaining how that works, but I think that's pretty easy to understand, so we'll just skip that. Static DHCP. We have two different ways of doing static DHCP in Nebula. So this can cause some confusion. One admin may decide to do it one way, one admin may decide to do it the other way. So let's talk about the two different versions and when you might want to use one over the other. The easiest way to do static DHCP is you go to the client page. It shows you all of the devices that are currently connected to the network and any devices that have been recently connected to the network and are currently offline. And it shows you all sorts of information about them, including their IP address. So you can simply click a checkbox next to the device and choose to reserve the IP address. And from that point forward, every time that device connects to the network, it will always get the same IP address that it currently had when you checked that box, or that it last had when you checked that box. So it's an easy way to make sure their IP address doesn't change. Now, the downside to this is that you're stuck with whatever IP address they were assigned by the DHCP server initially. So if you want to specify a specific IP address for a device, instead of doing that on the client page, you then go into the interface page for your router. So whether that's a USG Lite 60 or whether it's a USG Flex H series, this is the page where you do that at. You go under the LAN interface configuration, and there is a static DHCP table. So there's a little plus button, you click add new. You will need to know the MAC address of the device. And if you've forgotten it, you can always go back to the client page, and that's something that we can display there, assuming the device has at least been connected once. Fill in the MAC address. and put in the IP address you want them to have. And from that point forward, every time they connect, they will get the IP address assigned to them here. So easy way, slightly harder way, but gives you more customization. Now, a question we get is, well, what happens if one admin did it here and one admin did it here? This page here, the static DHCP table on your router, takes priority over the IP policy. So if there's a conflict, this guy wins out. So a common question we get is what ports need to be opened up for Nebula to work. So for the vast majority of our customers, you simply plug in a Nebula device and everything works. For those of you that are really aggressive about locking down the firewall on your network, these are the ports you need to open up. Outbound ports, well, not inbound, just simply outbound ports to allow Nebula devices to communicate with the Nebula servers. This is available online. I think you can just search Zyxel Nebula and always type Zyxel before Nebula because there's a million different things out there called Nebula. So Zyxel Nebula, TCP ports or something like that. It is available on our website, and that's probably the easiest way to find it rather than copying down everything here. But you do need to open up two sets of ports on TCP for netconf. You do need to open up HTTPS outbound traffic NTP because we need to synchronize the time both for log purposes, but also that has to do with encryption of the data that's being sent between the devices and the cloud. And then a couple ports here. If you're using VPN, we've got two ports you need to open to also be able to use VPN. If you're not using VPN, you can skip those. So let's move on from that now to access points. Whoopsie, and I just dropped my headset. Give me just a second. Okay, I'm back. So we've gotten questions in the past about this stuff. Our tech support has gotten some calls on this, so we will put this in here just to help explain it to people. Basically, um, we have customers that'll say, "Hey, I've set the power output to 30 dBm in the Nebula interface, but when I check the monitoring page, it's not actually broadcasting on 30 dBm. So why is that?" So basically, this setting here is a maximum output power. So it's the maximum power the AP can use. It's not necessarily the power the AP is going to use. So why is that? First one is many of the access points don't support 30 dBm. So if you set it to 30 and 26 is the maximum output power, 26 is going to be the maximum output power that it can use. The other problem you run into or challenge you run into is when it comes to 5 and 6 gigahertz. Depending on what channel you are using, there are different rules for the power output. So even if your access point supports the power you've selected here, if it's operating on a channel that is FCC limited to a lower output range, you will only see the lower output power from that device. We aren't going to exceed the legal rules as far as maximum output power goes for those channels. And then I know for a while on the 6E products, there was a chipset driver issue that caused it to report incorrect power output information. I don't know if that was ever fixed on those 6E products. It is not a problem on the current Wi-Fi 7 products. Multiple SSIDs. So people use multiple SSIDs. To be able to segregate different types of users. And you usually do this using VLAN. So each SSID gets their own VLAN. So the accounting team connects to the accounting SSID and they get put on the accounting VLAN. A customer coming in and using your guest hotspot, they connect to a different SSID, they get put onto a different VLAN so that the traffic is segregated from each other. So that is the proper way of handling multiple SSIDs. Now, if for some reason you can't use VLANs, your customer is a small mom and pop shop, the router or the switches they already have deployed don't support VLANing, and they don't want to pay the money to upgrade their network to give proper security, we've got some workarounds that you can use for those customers. So one of those things we can do is we can do DHCP on the access point. So most of our access points have the ability to have their own NAT server. And so you can put those users that are on a certain SSID, you can put them on a different subnet than the rest of your other users using NAT mode, which essentially, keeps them off and isolates them from your primary network. We also have what we call here layer 2 isolation. So layer 2 isolation is another kind of cool feature on the access point. So when you enable that, it blocks all outbound traffic from the wireless users unless the MAC address that you're trying to access has been added to a whitelist. So what you do generally, if you're providing like, guest public hotspot access, is you simply put in the MAC address of your router's WAN port so they can only send data to your router to go outbound. Um, You can also maybe add like a printer if you need to give them printer access, or a file server if you need to give them file server access. So basically, once you've enabled that, every time they try to send traffic, the access point looks at where that traffic is heading. And if it's not on this whitelist, it just drops the packets. They cannot send any packets out. So therefore, they cannot access any resources on your network that you haven't given them explicit access to. Now, this does cause something which causes some confusion here. So if you are a wireless user, you have layer 2 isolation on there, and you put in some sort of sniffing app or, network scrolling app, they are going to be able to see other devices that are on your network. They won't be able to access them. They won't be able to send any packets to them, but they can see them. So why is that? And that's because the filtering is only done on an outbound basis. It's only the packets being sent out from the client device. Most devices that are on your corporate network are using multicast to send out various bits of traffic. So that multicast traffic is automatically sent to every device on the network, and that includes your wireless users, because it's not filtering inbound traffic to the client, it's only filtering outbound traffic from the client. So those devices that sit there and look for packets coming in will be able to see packets being sent from other devices on the network. So something to keep in mind. So when you're setting up and configuring an SSID in Nebula, we just have a toggle box here that basically says enable guest network. So if you enable that, it turns on that layer 2 isolation feature by default, and will automatically turn on intra-BSS blocking as well, which prevents wireless users from sending traffic to other wireless users. And for some reason, I have the wrong screenshot. Oh, I guess I do have the right screenshot technically. So it's right here under guest network under programmable SSID. Some troubleshooting tips given to me by the tech support team is to one of the most common causes of calls saying, hey, our wireless network is performing poorly, comes down to channel utilization. So that's probably one of the first things you should check is to go into the monitoring pages in Nebula for your access points and check the channel utilization. If channel utilization is really high, that's probably the cause of your problem. And the reason channel utilization is high is just you've got a lot of users using the same channel. It's been one of the biggest issues with Wi-Fi for a long time is 2.4 gigahertz has very little bandwidth available that has to be shared with all your 2.4 gigahertz wireless users, your Bluetooth devices, your video game controllers, RC cars, all sorts of stuff use 2.4, and they all have to share this little teeny tiny sliver of space. 5 gigahertz opens up a lot more spectrum for people to use, but a lot of devices don't support 5 gigahertz, or they support 5 gigahertz, but they don't support the DFS channels, which make up the bulk of 5 gigahertz. So you end up not using, half of your 5 gigahertz channels because your client devices won't connect to them. And 6 gigahertz has a huge amount of spectrum available, but very few devices currently support 6 gigahertz. So very often this is the cause of your problem is you've got too many users trying to use that same channel at once. Another area which causes some problems has to do with wireless roaming. So a lot of people don't realize this, but roaming is managed by the client, not by the access point, not by the router. So it's up to the client device to determine how often to check if there are other access points nearby and if they have a stronger signal. And it's up to the client device to determine, okay, there's a stronger signal nearby. How much stronger does it need to be before I change which access point I'm connecting to? Now, there is a feature called assisted roaming you can turn on in the Nebula interface. Um, so you can turn that on. It's 802. I think it's 11 or 1 K and V. Not all client devices support it. So turn it on. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't often, though, solve the problems. In particular, Apple devices historically, I'm not sure how it is today, but historically, Apple devices are really bad at roaming. I know my iPhone that I have, um, it's running the latest 26.01 iOS, and it still does not like roaming. I don't know how other devices work, but Apple in particular are famous for not liking to roam. So there is something you can do to try to solve that issue of poor roaming from client devices because we don't have the ability to control the client device and the algorithm they're using, but we can use a feature we call smart steering. So smart steering monitors the signal strength of the connected client. And if the signal is too low, it will actually force them to disconnect. And it will not allow them to immediately reconnect to the same access point. And the hope here is that this will trigger the client device to actually search for new wireless signals and realize that there's an access point closer to it that it can connect to. Now, this only keeps them off for a very brief period of time because if they happen to just be, in a bad location, there may only be the one access point they can connect to. So we don't want to keep them off continuously, but we will try to boot them off and prompt them to connect to a different access point. So you turn that feature on. And by default, the signal strength threshold before we try to kick them off is set to -70. And that is probably not the setting you want to use. So our sales engineer, Marcus, has given some suggestions of at least where to start. So for 2.4 gigahertz, start at -69. For 5 gigahertz users, start at -72. And for 6 gigahertz users, start at -75. And you may need to tweak this a little bit, based on the type of client device and the RF environment. But these are better starting points than the -70 that's the default in Nebula. So another feature we have, which often gets overlooked, is the ability to automatically assign devices connected to our switches to a VLAN based on their MAC address. So the first 6 digits of a MAC address are what's called an OUI. I don't know if people pronounce that we or how it's pronounced, but OUI. And that's assigned to a different manufacturer. Now, different manufacturers may have multiple OUIs, but every device uses an OUI as part of their MAC address, and it lets you determine what that device manufacturer is. So this is a really handy feature, especially for those of you that are doing voice, right? Because chances are you've only got one or two vendors of VoIP phone that you're using. So this way you can just plug in the VoIP phone to any port on your switch, and it will automatically get put onto your voice VLAN rather than needing to configure it on a port by port basis or manually copy in the MAC address of each individual device. So it's a really handy feature to have. So you find that in the switch configuration under voice VLAN, enable it, configure which ports and priority you want, and then you can add as many different OUIs as you want, or at least a lot of them. And we've already got them pre-programmed in there. So you simply use the drop-down menu and find the OUI for your devices. And we've got them sorted based on the manufacturer of the device. You can add multiple ones in here. And then anytime you plug those devices in, they will automatically be put on a voice VLAN. We also have the ability to do this for non-voice products. So that was the voice VLAN feature. We also have a vendor ID based VLAN. So this could be used for any type of device. Maybe your IP cameras need to be put onto a certain VLAN automatically. Maybe your warehouse picker, Wi-Fi pickers, they need to be able to scan and automatically get put onto a certain, I guess this is for wire though. So it wouldn't be wireless pickers, but any other sort of wired device that you may have that needs to be on its own specific VLAN. You can do that here using the vendor ID VLAN. The difference here is because it's not just VoIP devices, there's too many manufacturers to have a drop down. So you can simply manually put in the OUI for the vendor that you're using, and it will automatically then assign the device to the VLAN based on that. So really handy to have. Another common cause of calls to our tech support is people looking through their Nebula logs and saying, oh my goodness, my logs are filled with alerts about broadcast storms detected. So, do I need to do anything with that? And usually the answer is no, it's not a problem. But then the next question is, well, I don't like my logs getting filled up with this. It's making it hard for me to find the things that I am looking for. And the reason for this is really simple. The storm control setting by default is set too sensitive for today's modern day network. I've been told, the default settings here are 100 packets per second. Um, And unfortunately, I've been told that just basic, browsing like a Facebook page can oftentimes be enough to trigger enough packets to trigger this alert. So you need to change that and raise the number higher than what it's set to. Our sales engineers suggest starting at 200 as the default setting here. So change it from 100 to 200. And if you're still getting too many alerts in your logs, slowly raise it from 200 to 300 until you find the sweet spot for you that doesn't give you too many false positives. We're almost done, guys. Just a couple things here. Um, we have an AI chat feature in Nebula. They've been adding some new features to it recently. I'm not going to discuss any of those. I'm going to discuss what I use it for. I find it is a fantastic tool for searching our documentation. Our documentation, we have so much documentation, but it is organized so poorly and so hard to search through. And our AI chat has solved that for us. If any of you have gone through it, we've got, giant multi-hundred page manuals for each different device. We've got manuals for Nebula itself, which are different than the manuals for the device interface. We've got I forget what they're called now, but the tech support team posts up notifications and guides on how to configure different things. So there's all of this documentation, and chances are what you're trying to do has been documented, but it can be so hard finding it. So my suggestion is to open up the AI chat function in Nebula. For some reason, until you hit enter or type something in, it doesn't actually run. But once it does run, then you have to type in what you're looking for. Um, And I suggest you don't ask it a question. You don't treat it like, Chat GPT. Just type in the feature or function you're looking for documentation for, and it will spit up some explanation of using that feature. It may or may not be helpful. But for me, what's always helpful is after it gives you its answer, it gives you hot links to the documentation that discusses where it got those answers from. And that's, at least for me, where I personally prefer to go. I prefer to look at the actual documentation and have that open because it's easier, usually formatted better and easier to read than this. And also this summary tends to, overlook maybe some important details that you need. So anyway, I find this is a great tool for, if I'm configuring something and I'm not sure what the options mean or what that setting's for, type it into chat, scroll to the hot links it gives you and check those hot links for the proper documentation. I find it saves me a lot of time. And with that, we are done with this long, boring topic. Hopefully, there was some stuff in there that wasn't boring and that you were actually curious about, or hopefully there's something in there that helps solve you, from pulling out your hair at some point in the future while you're configuring things. But go ahead, if you have any questions, send them in. Nothing has been sent in while I've been talking. But if you do have a question, I'll stick around here for another minute. And you can send it in using chat or Q&A. I can see either or to answer those for you. But thank you for turning up today. And just to highlight here, we do have user forums on our website that you can go to. I think the link these days is just still forum or forums, plural, .zyxel.com. And you can go in there. There's a section for more of the VAR-oriented products and more community-oriented products. But that's usually where release notes and security announcements are made first. It's also monitored by our headquarters team, including product management, to get ideas for what features people are looking for or what sort of things are causing people to have headaches so they can, revise and improve the interface for those features. I have got no questions, so I am going to go ahead and end today's webinar. Thank you for joining us, and I hope I see you at one of our future webinars. Thank you.